all here. Okay, so this is our talk, which had a vague abstract. So basically, the idea of this talk is that technology's come on a long way since we first introduced the current model for security. And I think we can say that security hasn't really kept up with changes in development. So although things are getting a little bit more secure, they're probably not getting secure at the rate that we would want them to. And this is putting quite a lot of strain on people who are in charge of security. So in this talk, we're going to discuss how we can use different models of security, and then we're going to also look at the impact that that's had on our business, because we started employing this change within security, and it's brought better well-being and mental health to us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Who are we?
So, I'm Alastair O'Neill. Some of you might know me as March. I'm the head of defensive security in Digital Interruption. I've got about 10 years experience in pen testing, and I'm really, really into weird InfoSec stuff, like formally verified kernels, that I'm not allowed to talk about at this talk. So that's basically me. And there's a picture of a bald cat there, so yeah, bald cats are great.
I'm Saskia Coplans, and I'm head of security, risk and compliance. I have about a decade's experience in information governance and also standards. And I'm into really weird InfoSec conspiracy theories that I'm not allowed to talk about ever because it makes us look really weird. If you want to talk to me later in the pub, I shall tell you. Okay, so what's information governance? Bit of an interesting one to start off a security talk about. But really, information governance is the driver for security. If you didn't have information governance, if you didn't have the need to secure information, you'd have nothing to hack. So this is about the management of information at an organisational level. And what we need to do within information governance is create and understand the balance of why we're securing information. So security is basically saying we need X amount of people to access this information and use this information, and we need to keep that information secure. So really, if I had my way, the internet would be an impenetrable black box. No one would be able to get into it. But then when I work with people, they rightly say we actually need to access this information and do things with it. So we have to find this compromise. We use quite a lot of stuff within IG, frameworks for employees to handle data. So these are protocols that we put in place, which is where we start moving over into the security area. And then we do a lot of stuff around policy. So this is about how we guide the behaviours of how we deal with information. So I'm one of those great people who spends a lot of time writing policies. I really enjoy policies and I absolutely love standards. I think that being clear and concise is incredibly important. We don't tell people what they need to do, they don't know how to do it. So it's not always all about hacking.
So let's look at this list of what information governance actually encompasses. And some of you might even see things you're familiar with here, right? So we have risk management, we have privacy, we have audit. I mean, that's pretty much the bog standard security stuff. We have, for example, business intelligence, data science, finance. All of this stuff is contained within information governance, and all of it will be part of any kind of security work, really, especially in any kind of big organization. And so that's why kind of we're talking about information governance at the start. We're going to use it as a sort of a framework to define what security should be for the purpose of the talk. If you disagree, you can talk to me later, but I'm right.
And information governance isn't just about securing information from an organisational or a government level. It's actually about your own personal information and how you govern your own personal information. So if we look here, we've got things like privacy. We've got stuff like IT management. We've got stuff that you're going to look at. Finance, for example. You know, you're going to want to be able to secure your financial details. You don't really want everyone to see in your bank account. So information governance is something that is part of our everyday lives and becoming more so because we have so much information that we're giving away and we need to understand the risks involved in doing that and how we secure ourselves personally.
So this leads us on to what is information security. So information security is, we're going to say, a subset of information governance, because it is. It's about trying to secure how data is actually stored and accessed. And we're going to talk about the CIA triad in a little bit, but it provides organizations with appropriate control over their data via the CIA triad. Does everyone know what the CIA triad is? Because if you don't, you'll find out soon. It's exciting. And it's not just me creating a weird box where I've stripped out glibc and I've managed to cut down the kernel, or it's a formally verified kernel, or some kind of inaccessible vault. Because in the real world, people do need to access their data, people need to develop solutions for things, the business needs to keep going. So basically, there needs to be a sort of a balance struck between risk and availability and accessibility.
So again, it's about this balance. It's about the balance that you have, which is to do with the risk analysis. And for information governance, we do a number of things where we can make a decision based on certain frameworks. So things like privacy impact assessments, so we can see the impact of if something was leaked from a privacy perspective. We can have data breach impact assessments as well, so we can look at the impact of if there's a data breach. And this isn't just about fines, and it's not just about GDPR. This is about the impact on everyday lives. So one of my favourite examples is the Ashley Madison breach. That was a horrible personal data breach, and because it was about linking people up to have affairs, the impact of that being released was devastating, and 4 people committed suicide directly linked to that. So we do need to make a clear judgment about why. Why is it that we're securing this data?
So the model that I talked about before, the CIA triad, look, our bug is holding it, it's adorable, is a model that we use a lot for sort of quantifying the risk and security. Is anyone here a pen tester? Has anyone done CVSS? Is anyone familiar with CVSS? CVSS is a bit janky, but this is part of it. And so it's integrity, confidentiality, and availability. Weirdly enough, I was looking for a definition of when, or like an origin of this, and apparently this is a pretty organic term. Integrity came from the Bell-LaPadula model in 1976, which is like a formal computing state machine, and confidentiality came from the BBAT one in 1984. They were when those were defined, and for some reason we managed to just sort of tack on availability as another important thing that we want, which is good. But yeah, this is sort of the core of how we define sort of how secure things should be and how that can be impacted, basically.
And there's a bug in the middle, because we have bugs in everything.
I thought we were being very subtle with that.
Very subtle, indeed. So what does this mean in practice, Ali?
So basically, this means that information security is a continuous process. There's no real end to it. As long as your business is growing and developing, and as long as you're storing data or processing data, you're going to need to keep doing this information security. It's an ongoing, never-ending thing, an Ouroboros eating its own tail kind of deal. And it means that the need for security isn't constrained. It needs to constantly be going, it needs to be constantly developing, it needs to be there all the time. But one of the problems with InfoSec in general, as part of this talk, is that we find the solutions to insecurity are kind of constrained. It's a very sort of reactionary process, and basically, there's issues with it.
And technology keeps moving, and it keeps changing. So think about what we didn't have 5 years ago that we have now. Think of your phone. You literally carry a computer around with you, whereas it used to be a flip phone. I mean, remember the Matrix? Everyone thought they were so cool because they had a little flip phone. Internet of Things, medical devices. There are all these things that we didn't have before. But the model for security isn't changing. Technology is changing, but security isn't changing. So not only are we constrained, we do a snapshot. A pen test is a snapshot in time. We're constraining how we respond, but we're also constraining the model.
And it's not just pen tests, right? I mean, even IOCs, even other, like blue team kind of stuff is very much a sort of a snapshot of something at a given point in time. It's all very static and it's all very reactionary.
Indeed.
So this brings me to talk a little bit about these like constraint things, how we kind of try and get around them, but we don't really do a great sort of deal. So I'm assuming everyone here has read some kind of massive threat report where they attribute it to some government or whatever else, and that's kind of, it happens a lot in InfoSec, and I feel like it's kind of a cognitive sort of trick we do to make ourselves feel like we are actively protecting against these groups, whereas in reality, each time, we're just finding them again as a reaction and then pushing out IOCs. And this is what I call the Jeff Goldblum theory, where it turns out that really it doesn't matter whether it was China or Russia or whatever else. It could be Jeff Goldblum hacking your alien mothership. What really matters is how your data was accessed and how secure it was and how you can improve on that.
And this is how you start to think about things in a more continuous way. Because in reality, a constrained solution to a continuous problem puts a strain on the mechanisms and people responsible for it. And what it's really doing is it's putting a strain on the people who are responsible for it.
I'm going to do my best Yoda voice, so we'll get ready. Stress leads to burnout! No, I'm not doing it.
Stress leads to a burnout. Burnout leads to quitting.
There we go. And quitting leads to skill shortages as well, which is another thing that we're going to try and broach in this. Because again, a constrained solution to a continuous problem is not a good thing. It puts people under a lot of pressure.
And here the snake starts chasing its tail again, because when you have a skills shortage, it means there's not enough people, and if there's not enough people, it means that individuals are given more to do, which puts more strain on the individuals, and round we go like the magic roundabout. So we really need to kind of understand the skills shortage if we're going to address it. So these are some of the job roles that were taken out of Mark Carney and David's skills matrix. They're doing some really awesome stuff with this at the moment, so if you're interested, have a word with David afterwards. But it's kind of growing in all sorts of really interesting ways, and Ali and I will be adding some stuff to it, and I know that Jay's had a look at it as well, and Shirin has been very involved with this. Shirifari from Outsource, I don't know if she's...
The chaps with the asterisks beside them are the ones we've added for the purpose of the talk, really.
And because really the matrix is a live thing and a growing thing. So we've got penetration testers, security researchers, red team members, compliance members, incident responders, threat intelligence, firewall engineers, security architects, SWAT team members, privacy and data protection specialists, and risk management. That's a lot. But we see security as a singular thing. But it's not. It's an ecosystem. But it's enormous. And when you actually look at the skills matrix, they start mapping the skills next to these as well. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Yet we still think of security as a singular thing, a singular responsibility, and we still think of it very much as offensive. We don't really think of the defence side until someone goes, "Hi, I'm blue team." And it's skills focused.
But, yeah, so talking about the skills matrix and the vast amount of roles we have, one of the other issues that we've got here is that we have a sort of a thing in InfoSec where there's skills versus competencies. So I know a lot of people who ask me, how did you get into InfoSec? The answer is, I just accidentally did. And there are no formal pathways into InfoSec. There are a few universities that are doing InfoSec degrees at the moment, so Aberta is one, but that's pretty much the closest thing I think that there is to a formal education for InfoSec, and even that is in very, very early days. And it's kind of unusual because every other skilled profession that deals with, risk or things that could be damaging will have, for example, they have universal skills, they have scalability in what you're doing, there's assessments and they are accessible, they're regulated and they're accountable.
And skills versus competencies is important because a skill is a singular learned attribute. It is a thing.
No, it's still alive. It's okay.
It's a thing that you learn in order to accomplish another thing.
No.
A competency. A competency is a measure. It's a measure of ability. It's a measure of characteristics. It's a measure of skills put together that means that you can successfully create a function, which is why when we have things like national occupational standards, we have skills and experience and we have knowledge and understanding. Because your skills in a vacuum don't mean anything if you don't understand why you're doing it or what you're doing it for. So a competency is a measure of the how, as opposed to the what. And this is what we absolutely do not have in InfoSec, is any coherent, tangible or joined up standards. I really wish we put that slide in that you sent me the other day, can you explain it, the one where it's a standard and then we need to put all of the standards together and then we end up with 15 standards?
Oh my god, yeah, it's an XKCD comic where it's there's 14 competing standards. Why don't we just make a new standard to unify them all? And then the result is there's 15 competing standards.
And a lot of that's to do with the fact that the bodies who are creating the standards aren't joined up and it's not on a national level. We're basically a very, very infantile sector. And by that I mean we're young rather than we are behaving in an infantile way. And really what we need is something coherent. So the idea behind something like a national occupational standard is it describes the competency that is needed for the job role, but it also explains that competency to business. So businesses, employers, and educational institutions can actually have an agreement with the people in the industry about what skills are needed to build these competencies. And you don't even have to have a singular competency in an individual. Ali and I are a joint CISO. We are outsourced CISOs for our company.
I'm half of one functional person.
And I am the other half of that functional person. So we go into organisations and we look at their security posture. We take everything apart, we threat model, we do all of these different things. I come in, crack the whip, I write a load of standards and policies and explain what they need to do, and then Ali goes in and actually configures it.
Yeah, I sit in a dark room and I type a bunch of commands into whatever server is required.
Firewalls. He's like a little column.
I'm exactly like a little column.
And we're trusted. We're trusted as individuals, but what's our qualification base for this? I've been writing standards forever, I've been doing information governance forever, but where's my career pathway that says that I'm the right person to do this? Why are you trusting me, people? Do trust me, please, I'm very good at my job, but why are you trusting me? How do I evidence this? How has it been assessed?
Right, and that's a thing that we miss in InfoSec, I think. So, one of my many bugbears that will probably be showing up in this is that in OSCP, for example, one of the requirements, one of the parts of the test is, it basically has you write a buffer overflow. And there weren't that many pen testers here, but if there were, I'd ask for a show of hands about how many people would use a write their own buffer overflow on a sort of, just a normal pen test job. It's really, really low. It's not the kind of skill that we really require. It's a sort of, technical curio that we just have in there for no real reason. It's not formally defined. It doesn't fit the role that we're doing in a day-to-day business.
But someone at some point has decided that this is what we need to do. Because really, we're guided a lot by the thoughts and influence of others within InfoSec. And let's face it, would you go to a doctor whose only qualification was being mentored by some random person they found on Twitter?
And there's a lot of this. I see a lot of I'm not to put mentoring down. It's absolutely the best we have right now, and it's better than having no one, but we should definitely be thinking about formalizing the education structure in InfoSec a little bit better.
Because it's not just medicine. Realistically, think of your lives. Would you go to an unqualified lawyer? Would you use an unqualified accountant? Because the impact of that being wrong is massive.
Right.
And the impact of poor security is massive.
Has anyone seen the massive, enormous fine that BA just got hit with? I mean, we're responsible for a surprising amount of money, apparently, now.
And mentoring is useful. It's useful at an organisational level once somebody is already within a business. But actually, there's a number of issues with mentoring in the wider world, which is why it tends not to be used in other professions in the way that we use it. Mentees are inherently vulnerable.
Right. Again, there's no way to really judge who your mentor is, their qualifications. This could just be someone who's doing it, for fun, right? And to be really serious about it, there are some concerns I have, certainly. If anyone wants to know, you can Google Captain Crunch and find out about, really unpleasant things in this industry, to be honest with you.
People are exposed to things that they shouldn't be exposed to. And in reality, just because my route into InfoSec worked for me, and Ali's route into InfoSec worked for him, trying to duplicate that is going to be impossible. Because unless everybody in this room wants to go and live in Azerbaijan, work undercover in a baby house, write standards for the government, move to Kazakhstan, then back to Dubai and then Germany, work for a number of NGOs, different organisations, the GMC, you see my point. Everything is experiential for me. I can't pass that knowledge on. That is particularly personal to my experiences. So without a structure where we have some kind of formalised way of saying, this is the expectation, this is the minimum we expect, this is the core of what we need you to do, we're all going to be flapping around trying to grab bits off each other to create a jigsaw puzzle that kind of looks a bit wonky.
Yeah.
And this is causing a huge amount of frustration in the industry. It's causing frustration for employers because they're trying to get these unicorns that don't exist. And it's causing frustration for the people who are trying to get into the industry because they're all trying to be unicorns because no one knows exactly what it is that they need to do.
So this is actually the quote, which we have just because it's great. It's a good quote. But yeah, I mean, essentially it means that there's a lot of, I guess, the industry is very loosely defined, what we do is very loosely defined, and that causes problems, which we'll see in a minute. So here is, some of you guys might know this, right? This is a meme from the internet.
And it's Jay's favourite meme ever.
I've been reliably informed it's good. But yeah, this is as seen by so on and so forth. And everyone, you know, they're all seen as characters from film and TV. We're always Darth Vader. We even see ourselves as Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, this is kind of how we do perceive ourselves.
And it's certainly how our behaviours come across as well.
Yeah. That's true. Like, again, security is so ill-defined, and we have a lot of weird and sort of contradictory advice a lot of the time. So, for example, we haven't gotten our passwords right for, you know, ever. We've had so many different contrasting bits of advice about passwords going back years and years and years.
Does anyone want to know what the NIST standard is for passwords?
I don't even know what the NIST standard is for passwords. I'm not sure I want to know.
64 characters. Because that's realistic.
That could be.
Try remember it.
Well, you could spend all week memorizing it.
Could you even get it in a password?
Just write it down.
But even then, right, writing it down is not actually bad advice for most people, as long as they don't leave it somewhere where everyone else can get it. But, again, password managers are better, but there's all this sort of...
2FA? No 2FA?
I hate 2FA.
Yeah.
Why would I want to give my phone number to Facebook? That's just a bad idea.
I have 2FA on Find My iPhone, and the FA is a message to my iPhone. I discovered when I'd hidden my iPhone in the bottom of a bag.
But yeah, all of this contradictory and even sometimes maybe not great advice or not great way, sometimes disclosure, for example, could be handled badly too. So VLC, the media player, was recently downloading updates that they were checking whether they were signed. They weren't using transport layer security. People caused them a lot of hassle, and we didn't really ingratiate ourselves as a community to those guys.
We don't ingratiate ourselves as a community to a lot of people. Ali and I have been on sites before where testers have been laughing at devs code, and then the devs were sat behind them. That's fun. That doesn't make us look like arseholes at all. We scream at vendors. Every time a vendor gets something wrong, we just absolutely lose our shit and start screaming at them. But what we don't do is go in and say, well, this is what you could have done. This is how you could have done this better in the first place. So we look like bullies.
Yeah, it makes us look hostile, and that in itself makes it difficult also to attract people into the industry as well, I think. It makes us
particularly
kind of
diverse
gatekeeping.
people.
Yeah,
because people don't want to work in industries that come across as hostile and angry. They don't always feel welcome in hostile and angry environments. This makes it difficult for us to be able to connect with the people that we're trying to protect. And it really, really overshadows the really good work that we do.
And yeah, that worked, thank God. And how does this impact consumers? So for the sake of just quickly consumers here, we mean anyone who's sort of buying our services, right? Businesses and developers feel judged. I mean, again, I've been pen testing for 10 years. I have come on site where people are like, please don't hack us. Please don't ruin our day. Please don't make us miserable. And, you know, they find it stressful to have a pen tester around. And again, when we attack and we are inconsistent, and it happens a lot, right? You could get two different pen testing firms, and the reports will be different. People will highlight different issues. People will put things with different risks, ratings, and so on and so forth. It makes people feel attacked, right? And they feel like it's inconsistent. When we prevent software going live because the pen test has been scheduled for 2 weeks before it's supposed to go live, and we stop it because we found a massive issue, it's not good. We're the blockers in this scenario. And eventually, I think people sort of stop listening to us. And software is released insecurely. I mean, I want to give an example, but there's just...
So many.
Yeah. I mean, presumably BA had been pen tested, right?
A recent client who was on site and they didn't want to get a pen test because it was...
Yeah. So we were recently on site, and a client of ours didn't want to get a pen test because it would have cost as much to pen test this site as it would have just for them, as much as they paid to just get the site and everything set up.
Oh no, it would have cost more. That was the site only cost $5,000.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Basically, it was super expensive and they didn't want anything to do with it.
We've had some really great situations. We had one client who just kept emailing us and saying, could you just change the report and give us a clean bill of health? And we're like, no. We've got like quite a major vulnerability. Fix the vulnerability and we'll do a retest. They were like, oh, it's just because we've got some people who want to do some funding. You just do it, we promise we'll fix it. And I'm like, it's not an MOD. It's a penetration test, and you have a vulnerability, and you need to fix the vulnerability, and then we'll come in and we'll do the retest. And we just kept going round in circles, and this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what we do within security. And the reality is they probably didn't know how to fix a vulnerability and didn't want to pay someone else to do it.
But again, this means that there's pressure on us. Again, there's pressure on the businesses, pressure from the businesses, and stress leads to burnout. Burnout leads to quitting, and quitting is, again, looping back to the skill shortage. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but probably 3 times a week I think, that's it, I'm done with computers. I'm going to live in a cave on the Faroe Islands and herd goats for the rest of my life. No more technology.
Because this is how we feel.
Yeah, right.
Like, literally, we're sat with our cup of tea in a burning room. It's all fine. If anybody needs a graphic designer, I did all of these. I'm very proud of them. Can you tell? But how can we do things differently, Ali?
Well, we are trying a few things differently, but especially we want to be seen as this guy, not Darth Vader. We don't want to be the guy who wanders around force choking people. We want to be the guy who gives sage advice, dies, but still gives sage advice. Yoda is constantly productive even when he's dead. And this is where kind of we can start maybe taking mentorship in a different way, right? We can start passing on our collective knowledge to people within the businesses that we're already working with. And we can start sort of empowering the teams that we work with. So, for example, we go to a lot of QA testing conferences, which are kind of very different to security conferences. But we're kind of, we try to make contacts. We want to see what sort of tools are they're using and integrating into, say, like the CI/CD pipeline. And yeah, that's one of the starting things that we're going to talk about.
We also go to developer conferences where Jay gets booed, because that's how popular security is. And we've got some of our lovely testers in the audience, because we are starting to pull devs and testers, I think, a bit more coherently into InfoSec conferences as well. But if we don't mix around the conferences, then we're not spreading the knowledge. And really, this is what it needs to be for us. We need to be sharing the knowledge, not hoarding the knowledge. Because for all that hoarding the knowledge is like, yay, we get paid a fortune, nothing actually changes. And without sharing that, we're basically stopping things from progressing in a way that could be secure and really, really usable. I was asked at a panel that I was on with Amy recently, what am I excited about for the future of technology? And my response was, absolutely nothing. I work in security. I'm terrified. Fear leads to anger.
So let's talk a little bit about left-shifting security and DevSecOps. Is everyone here familiar with DevSecOps or left-shifting security? Yes, we have hands, all people that I know. Excellent. So basically this involves integrating security into the development pipeline. And we can do this kind of thing for almost anything that you can have a development pipeline for. So for networks, for software, for hardware. If you can create a build pipeline for it, you can integrate security into it. And one of the great things about this is the responsibility for security is distributed across an entire team, and across a period of time as well. So you kind of get rid of that technical debt, right? So, for example, instead of developing something for 3 years, then you get it pen tested and it turns out it has a million fatal flaws from the very beginning in the entire basic architecture, and now you've got to start from scratch. You don't have to do that anymore because you'll have identified all of those flaws way earlier on in the SDLC. It creates a space for like non-technical people to add security value as well. So like purely, say getting product owners involved in working out maybe what could be potentially issues at the start, right?
Things like threat modeling, having the right security mindset. This is stuff. You didn't think of your threat model, did you?
No.
These are stuff that people with a good security mindset can add to the security posture. And DevSecOps is brilliant, and it's quite a new idea, and it's something that's growing. But I think even within that, it's constrained in itself, because it tends to talk about developers and how developers do things more securely. But entire teams can be brought into this. One of the organisations that we worked for, I was on site with them for about 8 months. Yeah, stress leads to burnout. But the legacy that I left with them was bringing in a DevSecOps environment, but they've done it with their QA testers, which makes perfect sense. Because you can split QA testers off into two fairly broad groups, which is the pretty technical ones and the less technical ones. And the technical QA testers can pick up a lot of the stuff that we do as security testers very, very easily. And when they do, it means we don't have to do it. Because let's face it, who wants to tick through the OWASP top 10?
I mean, it can be fun sometimes, but yeah. Instead of being seen as Darth Vader sometimes, I'd like to be Yoda. I'd like to have my own planet.
And talking of the AWOS top 10, if we create the right tools, we wouldn't have to. Well,
that's not strictly true. We'd still look for some things. But, so I mean, one of the things that I've found since I've started hanging out with QA testers and other people is that our tools as a security industry are really, really obtuse. I was using Metasploit a few days ago, and I realized I've never used a tool with this interface before in my life. It's really sort of weirdly put together. It's like the set R hosts and stuff is almost like you're exporting environment variables in Linux. It's peculiar and it's not intuitive. And when I've used QA testing tools, which I have been using or at least seen, they are really, really intuitive. There's you don't need to put a lot of thought into how it runs. It just runs in the background. And they also tend to integrate really nicely into the CI/CD pipeline, so they can give you continuous feedback all of the time. At the moment we're actually trying to develop a tool that's a vulnerability scanner for Android apps that is basically supposed to integrate in with Jenkins and other tools in the CI/CD pipeline. And the idea is that we're taking all of our collective security knowledge and letting QA testers use it instead. Instead of teaching people how to hack, instead of kind of coming up with the way that we're doing it with the mentorship and the OSCP, and all of that kind of stuff, which hasn't really managed to fill the skills shortage. Maybe we should think about giving people ways to build securely so that we take, again, that technical debt and that pressure off us. And in this context as well, tools, we're not just talking about software, maybe also things like frameworks for how security should be built from the start.
It's a tool. Really, a tool can be anything in this context that helps you or enables you to do something. So it could be a framework, it could be a policy, it could be something like threat modeling, it could even be training people with the right mindset. One of the things that's awesome about QA testing tools is the names. They're absolutely obsessed with vegetables.
They've also got really cool names like Taurus. I mean, that sounded awesome.
They have selenium, but every time they go out, I'm like, selenium, which really irritates people when I'm training QA testers. But Rex is the tool that we're developing because I really like dinosaurs, so it seemed like a good name at the time. And it's in testing stage at the moment, so if anybody is developing Android applications and wants to test it, get in touch with us and we'll get you a sign-in. So this is where we go back to the skills matrix. The skills matrix is focusing very, very much on our internal skills and our internal industry. But actually there are a lot of skills that are quite relevant to what we do that already exist. And a lot of technical and non-technical people that are already within the ecosystem of putting together software and need to think about security. And if we start empowering them with the tools that they need to think more securely and operate more securely, we can start spreading the responsibility for security so that it's not all sitting on us as security professionals. This doesn't do us out of a job, but it makes our job more targeted and it makes our job more useful at the end. But the main thing that it does is it takes that horrendous responsibility away. One of the things about doing a pen test at the end of development is it's like a game of Jenga. Have you ever tried to put the Jenga rod back into the pile without knocking it over? So we kind of stuff it with stuff and call it patching and hope for the best. The product owner there is wearing one of our patches because people like to beat product owners up. So these are some of the things that we can put in place. This is just a snapshot, it's an idea. There are all sorts of different things within security, but product owners can create the right requirements, they can do initial security considerations, defining the risk and the response, so things like breach implications is something that they can define. The implications of data protection is something that they can define. Then we have the developers creating secure builds, implementing technology, interpreting vulnerabilities and solutions, learning secure code. Doing things in sprints and then testing after each sprint means that you don't have to necessarily have an enormous pen test that takes 2 weeks at the end, which is vitally important for you to go live, only to find that it's full of holes. Jay did a test once which was horrifying, where he was able to steal the money out of every single bank account from an application because the vulnerability was so embedded in the code they couldn't take it out. They couldn't sell the application. They would have to rebuild the application. Then we have the testers. We do have the testers, they're our cousins. Investigate and influence, initial due diligence, requirements, technology, vulnerabilities. These are people who are already poking around with this tech. And, sorry, that really scared me for a second. Vulnerabilities are basically just bugs, and software testers are already looking for bugs.
We have some more bugs, but not of the software kind. We have one. So designers, for example, again, they can help in building tools with better UI, scalability, and usability. Like one of my bugbears, again, with software tools and security tools not having great UI. Has anyone here used PGP? I don't think anyone. Yes, excellent. Would any of you say its usability is good?
No.
Yeah, it's an incredibly essential tool. I mean, we don't really have anything else pretty good for email encryption except for S-MIME, but people don't want to use PGP. Even the creator of PGP doesn't use PGP for his emails. That's why we've got a problem. We also have the deployment people. So, for example, these guys can be involved in configuring the pipeline correctly. They can be involved in security considerations when it comes to the pipeline, when we do the testing and so on and forth, or when we talk about this. And they can also be involved in like the final due diligence, even for like deploying boxes. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we do that could be done by anyone really involved in the process of setting up the server. And we also have security, which is us.
Put my glasses back on. Security.
So we can be involved in stuff like threat modeling. We can be involved in like really interesting like bug hunting. Maybe we could even do buffer overflows on our day-to-day business now. And we can also help verify, issues that have been found by other people during the testing process, and just generally giving advice and being Yoda, sitting down happily, doing our stuff. Doing our thing.
And again, security in this context is security mindset. So it could be a technical person, it could be a non-technical person, it might be that you have a privacy lawyer in your organization. Are you actually using that privacy lawyer to help you understand why you need to be secure, or are you just using them to mop up the pieces after you breach? There are people like me everywhere. I'm just naturally incredibly suspicious. I really am. I literally trust nobody. I assume everything is going to be the worst case scenario, and it's because I've worked in child protection.
I just know that everything is the worst case scenario because I've tested things for so many times.
So literally every time I look at anything, the first thing I'm looking at is a location marker because I was abducted as a child. It's okay, it wasn't a big deal, it was a parental thing, but that's actually a reality. So it makes you very suspicious and you think in a certain way. So if you think of worst case scenario, then you can start to say, what's the threat? And that's basically threat modelling. Yeah, then you can go look on Wikipedia and get some things that sort of give you an acronym, come out with Stride, but it's basically threat modelling. It's thinking about what the threats to the data are. So again, we need to drive from why are we protecting the data.
So to loop back to our original fear and doubt, no, that's the wrong thing. But to loop back to like stress and burnout, how does this impact us? So if security is embedded when we test from the start, it means that our sort of input is more interesting, it's more welcome, and it's generally more fun for us. There's nothing fun about doing a 2-week test on something that no one cares about anymore or has thought about in terms of security. No one enjoys it, I don't enjoy it, they don't enjoy it, the whole process is painful. It means our tests can be performed in smaller bursts as well, so we can sort of fit it around the SDLC and their sort of development processes. And it can be done when it's required by the devs as well, instead of simply as a sort of rubber stamp for PCSI, DSS, or something else that's forcing them to get this done. They can be performed in shorter timescales because we're doing more tests. And this means that we can also hopefully avoid my least favorite part of the job, which is the PDF report. So we've started doing things like raising issues in Jira, for example, which I'm really enjoying because I don't need to write it in like Office.
Because you don't have Office.
I have LibreOffice, it's almost the same. Oh, I do my laptop. We should show them the
The LibreOffice, when it was trying to read this presentation, was hilarious. All the bugs exploded.
Literally. But yeah, we try and make it a bit more collaborative. And again, the PDF report is not really a welcome thing. I've gone on so many sites where they're like, can you copy all of these issues into a CSV? Because that's what we'd be doing anyway. So, just be handy for our stuff. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Why don't you just, let us know? Why don't we do this from the start? Why does everyone get a PDF report? It doesn't make sense. No one enjoys this. And again, this is something that we're already doing. Jamal was shocked when he heard that I'd already set up a Jira VM just to start doing this kind of thing. And it's, I'm certainly enjoying it a bit more than the 1 hour or the 9 hours of reporting that I do for most tests.
So, as Ali says, this is something that Digital Interruption is already doing. Why did we decide to do this? We were knackered. We were absolutely knackered.
After 10 years of pen testing, I have been on site a lot. I have traveled a lot on weekends, and it's a really stressful job.
We were living on site, basically. There's now 6 people in DI, but sort of the core 3 of us were basically living on site. We have a developer who wasn't living on site. Actually, Rory as well, 4 of us. Yeah. So when you live in a travel lodge in Slough, you don't have a home life, you don't have a routine, your relationships suffer, your health suffers. That's why people have what we call the pen test belly. Jay knows all about that.
It's a real thing.
Your diet suffers, because having lived in the Hilton for 9 months and you've eaten the menu 92 times over, it all gets slightly depressing. There's a gym there, but you'll just watch the telly. You can't get sick because you can't go to the doctor because your doctor's local and you're not local anymore. We also find that as consultants we have to be responsive, so if a job comes in you have to do it, so someone has to take the hit, so back to Slough you go. Scheduling can be haphazard within a lot of consultancies, so I was literally dealing with a situation where I was scheduling work in for certain exercises and I had people from London coming up to Manchester and people from Manchester going down to London, which made no sense. And all of this puts a massive strain on people, and it makes people tired, and it makes people burn out, and it's not good for mental health, it's not good for mental well-being, and it's not good for people to be able to have a happy and conducive life or a family. Because we are resources, but we're also people. And our partners are people. So our partners are the ones that are left at home with the dogs and the kids and all of the responsibilities. And they're the ones that are taking up all of this emotional housework because we're absent. Because when we're not on site, we're thinking about security all the time, which is why we started with on the abstract. Who stays up all night thinking about the next vulnerability? We all do. And it's because there is so much responsibility put on us for security that it becomes absolutely encompassing. It sucks everything out of us.
Absolutely.
So when we set up Digital Interruption, we decided we were going to do things differently. We were very evangelical about DevSecOps because we're sanctimonious. We weren't going to do pen tests. And then we nearly ran out of money, so now we pen test.
But it's still slightly different.
But what we can do is we can use the lovely money from the lovely pen test that no one wants to do, and we can use that to offset the work that we do enjoy doing. So we have a massively discounted rate for Tech for Good. So if organisations need to develop secure tech because they're doing something awesome, like creating software that records cases of harassment, bullying, sexual assault all the way up to rape, they really need to be secure. And I really want that software to exist. So I give them a massive discount rate. And literally everyone within our organisation at some point has helped with the piece of work that we're doing for this software to make it as robust and scalable as possible. We do other pieces of work that centre around children, stuff around medical stuff, and we absolutely crash the rate down for it, but we make them do DevSecOps. It's not a pen test at the end. We're not interested in sticking stuff back in the Jenga tower. We want them to understand security.
What? Yeah. We've also got some pledges that we decided on. Well, this is Jamal and Saskia more than me, but I'm going to take some credit for it.
Well, obviously, because we're a flat structure. So,
yes, you're right, Your Majesty.
When we decided to set up the organisation, we went for unlimited personal days. No one in our organisation has to call in sick. I don't care why you can't come in. If you're hungover, I hope you had a lovely night. If you're having a really hard time, you can tell me and I will listen. If you have had surgery and you don't want to tell me what that is, that's fine. Because you know what? If I've got your sick note, I have to deal with that information, and that puts me in a legal position that I can't really be bothered with. I've got more interesting things to do with my time. So it's fine, self-certified.
We've also got no forced on-site, which is good, because basically it means we don't go on-site that much. If there's a test we're doing, we will try very hard and usually succeed at finding a way to do it remotely, or to at least limit the amount of on-site time that's going on.
Or draw straws.
Yeah, or draw straws.
Send me.
Basically, we send Jay.
Is booby trap, so Jamal always gets it.
We work with realistic utility. So a lot of organisations that we've all worked with in the past have said that they're 75% util and the rest is admin and research time. We are literally 75% util, if that. It's spread out across the year because we're small and we do have to be responsive. So sometimes we'll have a couple of months where we're absolutely back to back, and then we'll fart about for a bit when we're quiet, and give everybody a nice little rest. We shut the office down for 2 weeks at Christmas in our first year, and Rob, our dev, had never had Christmas off, and he was so excited he tweeted about it. Happy people. We have flexible working.
Yeah, so I, for example, work 3 weeks on, 1 week off. It's amazing. I have a week where I can just sit around at home doing nothing. I'm so happy. And it's great. We basically, Rob, for example, works completely remotely. He almost never comes into the office.
Yeah, he really likes the MBA, so we kind of do like day-night reversal or different hours if he wants to. So the way that I put that is, if our staff are observing a Ramadan or the MBA, they can work as they want. A little bit of a marketing tagline there. But flexible needs to be flexible. You know, people do have lives. Again, we're people, we're not resources. And most importantly, we have no bosses because no one listens to us anyway. But a flat structure is really important for people's well-being. It's a case of being able to say no. If you don't have a situation where you're being told by someone, don't look frightened.
Absolutely, boss.
If you don't have bosses, you can't be forced to do things that you don't want to do, which is bad for your mental health. I just have to resort to manipulation. And the impact this has had for us is brilliant because we've got hobbies. We do gardening and we go and see our families and we do skateboarding. Jay and I are going to be learning Russian because we can actually commit to going to a class every week on a Tuesday because we can move our work around this. Rob plays basketball.
Yeah, but he plays basketball all the time.
I don't know what you do. I don't want to know what you do. But there are things that you can do too.
Yes. So those 5 pledges might not be realistic for everyone, but we do, I guess, just have, ones that you could potentially look at as well. And I'm like, so let's start with managerial stuff. So don't promote bad managers is a bit aggro, but make sure that your managers are really people, because I've worked in some places where managers have been stupendously technical and don't want to deal with the actual management side of things. And I guess that kind of ties into enforcing good policies as well. So again, you want, a business that has policies that look out for the people that work there. You want to ask your staff. You want to get feedback from your staff about these things and about your manager and about everything else.
Trust not toys is a really important one for me. I have ADHD. I make no secret of my ADHD. And it does all sorts of interesting things to my brain, but one of the things I particularly have problems with is noise. I'm really noise sensitive, and I'm the ADHD kind of person that can't put on headphones and listen to music, because if I'm listening to music, I can't think of anything else. I just la 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 la, nothing gets done. Ping pong really irritates me. I can't stand drones. Nerf guns are the worst thing in the world, and I can just hear the tapping of snooker. So when I'm in an organisation that says we have Nerf guns and we have all these really cool stuff, that might be great, but for me it's really exclusionary. And I think for a lot of people on the spectrum, stuff like that can be really, really exclusionary. And really what we want to foster at Digital Interruption is an environment where everybody is welcome. And part of that mental health is understanding that mental health is also about neurotypical and non-neurotypical. And we don't know what Ali is, but he has his specific way of dealing with things. So we basically just trust our staff. We give them the autonomy to be able to make their own decisions. And finally, don't buy in bad practices.
Yeah, so this is more for like clients as well. But I mean, ask your penetration tester how he's doing, how far he's travelled. If you can, like, or she, yeah. If you can request someone from like nearby or locally and save someone, 3 hours travel on a Sunday, please try and do that.
Sunday travel's the worst.
Oh my God, I know.
It's the worst. And when people say you don't have to do Sunday travel, we've got a policy on it. Don't then say, but you have to get up at 3:30 in the morning on Monday.
Yeah, but essentially,
do things like look at Glassdoor. See what the staff are actually saying. So when you're looking at different vendors, when you're looking at different companies, if you're paying for companies to produce things and you're then consuming that, you're also paying for them to abuse their staff, if that's what their business culture is like. So these are things that we as a community can do. We can say enough is enough. We can say we don't want to do this anymore. We can say that we are tired. We can say that we are knackered. And we don't have to set up our own company in order to have that autonomy. There are so few of us and we are in such demand that we can actually start to say we don't want to do it like this anymore. And we can start to push that change ourselves. It's just about having the courage to do so.
Thank you for coming to our TED rant.
Thank you.
Anyone any questions?
Thank
you. Yes. Oh, everyone has questions. Oh God. I don't know whether we can deliver this up to people or how this works.
Well, you have to choose who you want to.
Just repeat the question. So I agree with most of what you're saying, but isn't Crest already doing some quite good work in terms of actually making us into a proper grown-up industry?
I think you're right, yeah. Crest are definitely making headroads in there. I don't think we're fully there yet, but I agree that Crest is doing pretty great, to be honest. Crest isn't unified. We've still got stuff like the CEH and LSCP and stuff. But Crest actually has integrated LSCP into the CIT now, which is cool. But yes, no, I agree. Crest is doing good stuff.
But it's optional, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's the thing. Something isn't a standard unless everyone's doing it, and that's the problem. So as someone who's been putting standards together forever, there is a reason that we have an absolute core minimum standards for things like childcare and medicine, because the impact of not doing that is that lives are at stake. And that's something that we have to take into consideration for security as well. If you don't get the software right for a plane and it falls out of the sky, what's the impact of that? And for all that Crest is doing great work, it's kind of doing it on its own, and it's also quite expensive. So if you take something like a national occupational standard, that's paid for by the government, it's universal, everyone has to have it, and you simply cannot practice unless you meet that standard. It is regulated. It is something that you have to adhere to. So I think that's the problem that we have at the moment, is security is just so incredibly expensive in every way. And for all that the frameworks for Crest are brilliant, it's constantly having to reaccredit. It's constantly having to resit exams. How many people did we have, or that we've known in our own personal community, that keep trying to resit the Crest exams and then they just run out of time because they get put on site again?
Yeah, I mean, it does happen.
Yeah.
But yeah. In short, Crest is good, but yeah.
Are you worried that putting pen testing and InfoSec behind formal education, that you're going to push out people who can't actually afford it or can't afford to have math?
So yeah, that is one thing that is worth talking about. And again, it comes down to cost. I would rather it all be free somehow. And I think, to be honest with you, security should probably be something we should be teaching from in primary school, right, or secondary school, or whenever we have computers in school here, because it's a really core and useful skill to have. Just even knowing that you shouldn't put your bank details into something that's not using HTTPS is something that a lot of people don't know, right?
But also pushing it behind education is an interesting point, because it's not pushing it behind education to have national occupational standards. It's having a clear and concise and uniformed and accepted understanding of what the competencies are. how you reach these competencies can be in a number of ways. So I worked throughout my A-levels and went to evening classes. So that was something that potentially, because of the frameworks that were in place, I was able to do. You can self-educate and then sit exams. There are different ways of doing things. The point of the National Occupational Standards are that you are able to demonstrate, you are able to have an assessment at the end that says you are competent to do something, but unless we've got something to assess against, you can't do that. So an example would be the General Medical Council. You train 7 years to become a doctor. You don't just say, right, I'm trained now, I'm going to go be a doctor. You have an assessment by the GMC and they license you to practice. And if you fail that assessment, tough tits, it doesn't matter that you've done 7 years of training. You won't be able to do it. It's like saying, oh, well, I've been learning to drive for ages, but, driving test. But you need to have that driving test and that constant assessment.
Do you think it gets really distorted where there's so much pressure from, to paraphrase the red team, the blue team sides? The red team, if you look at a lot of stuff where the blue areas are gone, the CIS and those things, and you get the pen testers, what's the security folks go, well, that's just worthless because those guys didn't know what they're talking.
Right.
It really drives it down. I mean, there's also like the chartered engineering stuff where there's security stuff out there for now. We're just destructive as a community around that stuff.
Do you mean like the competing sort of qualifications? Yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of, and that's something that again should be changed, right? Because there's nothing wrong. Like the system is great. It's not good from a technical point of view for what I want to do, but for like policy writing and for a lot of security stuff, it's an incredibly useful thing to learn and do. I completely agree that needs to change.
And when we have this,
and it's interesting. I can hear the people moving around the room just as you were saying that.
And having that level of competition as well actually holds us back. It means that we don't progress forward because we're not getting the right people making a unified decision. And that's, again, standards, I love them. But they're done in consultation, they're done every 2 years, and it's industry leaders that make the decisions, which is why we've changed the way that we educate. For education, for example, we don't teach in the way that we used to anymore. It's not always just about the kind of medical adage. There's a lot of industries that have managed to really incorporate new ways of doing things because they have this base standard that says, okay, right, well, it didn't work. It worked then, it doesn't now, this is how we move on.
And to come back to what you were saying about CREST, like CREST integrating OCP and CRT is a really good step towards something like that. It is a good first step. I'm happy with it at least.
We've had time called, so if anybody has more questions, we'll loiter and come and grab us.
Find me somewhere.
But we need to let you people in.